yesterday we did some CSS. We created this HTML, multiple HTML files. We found out that there are multiple ways of applying style to your document. The idea is that you have an HTML document, and in that HTML document is going to have a lot of data in it. This data is meant for browsers. That is the only purpose of HTML, is to send data to browser with some tags inside it. These are markup tags, and markup tags are essential and important when it comes to adding logic and meaning to that data. But then when we want to display this text, not that text, probably this text in green or red or any other color, if you want to apply specific styling to make our website more lucrative, more attractive, we will have to apply styling to it. And to apply that style, we found out that we can do that in line through the style tag, which is not recommended. We can put another tag style over here in the head, which is also not recommended. The recommended way is that you put it in a separate file, and in that separate file is going to have specific elements. Excuse me. It's going to have specific elements, and in these elements, they are going to provide a key property and value pair, and this value pair is going to influence the styling of that particular element. The reason we do that is because we honor a single responsibility principle, or another term for that is separation of concern. The concern of this document is data. The concern of this document is styling. Yesterday I went on and the place where we ended this discussion is we created a navigation bar. So let me turn on the live server. Okay, I'm going to hit go live. It is started now. I'm looking for a browser window. Okay. So we created this navigation bar, but then it did not look very impressive. We tried applying styling to it through UL and LI, and then added margin and padding and display inline, got it on one line, thinking that it is going to have uh, the styling of Amazon.com, but then we are nowhere close to it. But that's fine. There are different tricks that I'm going to show you today, which is going to help you write better quality code. So I'm going to come. So navigation bar is one thing that we tried styling, but it wasn't very good. For today, let's look at another element. I'm going to call it table. Table is going to draw that Excel-like grid on your screen, and through that screen, you will be able to generate multiple rows and column like data structure. So what I want is I want to create a table. The table is going to have say 5 rows inside it, and each row is going to have at least 4 columns in it. So when I do this, this is what it appears like. Let me go ahead and call it row 1 column. I'm going to leave it at that, and then I'm going to say 1 2 3 4. I'm going to copy this. I've held the Alt and the Shift key together, and then I clicked from here to here like this, and I copied all 4 rows. Let me go ahead and paste that here like this, and I'm going to change once again Alt and Shift. I'm going to change this to 2. These are some productivity tips. As you get comfortable with these tools, you will learn them too. I'm going to change this to row number 3, row number 4, and row number 5. Okay, I'm going to hit the save button, and let's see what we have on the screen. So this information is organized, but it does not look anywhere close to what a table or a nice grid would look like. So let's go ahead and do some styling. I'm going to come back to the CSS file. We know that we are styling a table. So this is the table selector, the element selector, and over here I'm going to apply border 1 pixel solid black. So it's going to draw a 1 pixel border around the table. Now this is getting a little better. Let's go ahead and add another property. I'm going to call it background color, and let's select a lighter theme. Probably I can enter a name here as well. Say light gray. Okay, light green will do. And it is picking up some style, but then I'm still not impressed. I'm still not happy with the internal arrangement. So let's go ahead and apply some styling to the row as well. So I'm going to say once again border 1 pixel solid gray this time because it is inside and probably a lighter color is going to suit better to this. And no effect. I don't know what happened, but let's go ahead and apply almost similar styling to of border 1 pixel solid. I'm going to leave it gray this time, and I see like a little grid drawn around these column boxes, but this is still not looking close to what I wanted it to be. Correct? And this is what happens when you as a front-end developer try to do styling. Styling is a different role in companies generally, and then those people are like great artists. They understand CSS better than a JavaScript developer, a .NET developer, and they have command over the selectors and the combinations that they would want to play. One thing that I can do is I can increase the width of these elements to say 300 pixel. Once I do that, the column has kind of stretched and it is tried to fit into these 4 columns and 5 rows. This is okay so far, but I'm still not impressed. There are better ways. I would want to have some form of control. Like this is the first row. By the way, that is called a head. So um, I can have another section here and I call it T head. T head can have a row inside it, and then instead of TD tags, it is going to have another tag and it is called T. I think it's called TH. And then because we have an extension installed, it automatically corrected the end tag for us. So I'm going to change all this to heading 1 2 3 4 5. Okay, and look at these nice headings. Now with these headings added here, I would want to have some form of separation between these rows. So I want this to probably have a light color, probably this to have a darker color, and then that pattern of strips is going to help us represent this information better. So my navigation bar, after trying a lot with CSS, does not look as pretty as Amazon.com. My table grid does not look as good either. So what is the option? And this is another important point for today's session and probably for the rest of your career. As you are building important applications, you should try and rely on frameworks. And one such framework that I'm going to introduce you for today is Bootstrap. Okay, this is a CSS framework. It was written using um, another styling technology like CSS is a technology. Bootstrap uses SAS, SASS. This is more like a programming language. What it eventually does it creates CSS files, but because this is a program, there is better control over the tag hierarchy, and the kind of information we want to represent through these tags. So we're going to use CSS. I'm so sorry. We're going to use Bootstrap today, and the easiest way for doing that, there are multiple ways you can do that. If you're doing node programming, you can run this command. If you are doing inline programming, you can pick up this information from a place called CDN. And if you don't know what CDN is, it calls for another round of whiteboarding. So I'm going to draw a computer here. This is a CDN. Now CDN, if you don't know already, it stands for Content Delivery Network. Now, one trick that I have probably showed you in a previous session is when you are when you run into such what do you say 3-word acronyms or 3-word technology names, you start reading them from right to left. So a network for the delivery of content. So there is not one computer, there are multiple computers. Now it looks like computer. So there are multiple computers. Uh, Probably this computer here is in India. This is somewhere in the west side, say Singapore. This is somewhere in Europe, and this is probably in the US. What CDN does is CDN generally is provided by ISPs, the internet service providers like Airtel, probably in the US, Verizon. This is a network of computer that is spread across multiple regions. And in these regions, they host specific files such as CSS file, such as JavaScript file. And the reason for doing this is because we are sitting somewhere over here closer to India, between India and US, but very close to India, inside India. We would want to have this content delivered to us at a very high speed. The internet provider in our country is say Airtel or Reliance, and if we make sure that our CSS file is present on this computer, the CSS file is going to get delivered to us very fast rather than probably somebody who is sitting deep in the east or deep on the west, right? So these framework creators, framework providers, they generally deploy this content. They buy some space from Airtel. They're going to say that, hey, for hosting a file of the size of 5 KB, can we go ahead and buy some space for you? And Airtel is like, okay, we are going to give you this space for say 10,000 rupees a year. That's not 10K. So 10,000 rupees a year, we're going to give you space for hosting this particular thing. With that, we generate a very different link. So probably our website name is www.consistency.com, right? If we host it in our computer, we are not going to have a good coverage that Airtel has across India, right? We have probably 5 servers. We have bought one space on Microsoft Azure. So the reach that Airtel has and the way in which they can deliver this content across India at the speed, we won't have that. We don't have that kind of infrastructure. And because we don't have that infrastructure, it is always logical that we buy the space from other people. So that is a content delivery network. What we are doing here through this link, notice that it is cdn.jsdeliver.net and they have this file hosted somewhere. So we're going to add a reference to this particular file inside our code. I don't want to use version number 5. I'm more comfortable with version number 4. So I'm going to go ahead and do some digging and see if I can find that reference over here. Now, notice that this is the link tag. I'm going to come here, click copy, and go to our HTML code. We already had a style sheet which is pointing to our local folder structure. This time, I'm going to add it to a remote location, which is sitting somewhere on the internet on probably Airtel server closer to our house. With this link added, now I'm going to go ahead and remove all of the table styling and navigation styling that I have added so far. So once I delete this and go back to our HTML, notice that everything is gone. Now if I come to table and apply a class here and put table here and hit save, notice that this table looks a lot better than our previous table, correct? The table TRTD, the width that we were applying, the border that we were applying, this styling is a lot better. And the reason is we are using a framework. We are using a framework called Bootstrap. So Bootstrap is doing all of this styling for us in the background. They have already created those things for us. Okay. And it is not just that the table is going to appear like this. They have multiple variation of these things. So if I want the table, I don't like light colors. If I probably want the table to have a darker style, I'm going to come here and type table-dark. I'm going to hit the save button. When I come to the browser window again, notice that my table all of a sudden has turned dark. There are multiple combinations that you can apply. Like if you just want the heading to be of dark color, you come back to your HTML, remove this part, and inside the head you apply another class called uh, thehead_dark. With this, if I hit the save button and go back to this, only the header is dark. There is another option available which is going to stripe different rows in different color, and that is another setting that you can apply once again at the table level. And once you apply this style here, table stripped, and save it, your table is going to look a lot fancy. Now, would you prefer developing a CSS file that looks like this, right, and creates ugly UI, or would you want to study this framework called Bootstrap and learn what classes are associated with what particular kind of style? There are a bunch of classes, there's a lot of classes, but then once again, I'm going to go back to my day one trick, and I'm going to look for Bootstrap cheat sheet. If you want to be a smart programmer, I would recommend that you keep such cheat sheets handy. And then this cheat sheet here is going to generate ready to consume elements for you. I'm going to click on the collapse all button here, and I'm going to see the options that are available. I can create forms elements, I can create grid elements, I can create navs. Navs are probably navigation. Let's go ahead and expand this. ul.nav, I'm going to click here and notice that there is something called as ulnav. I'm going to copy it, come back to our navigation section, and I'm going to replace our navigation with this particular section here. Once I hit save and go back to our code, notice that our navigation has kind of fixed itself. Make sense? It is a lot easy to use a framework and get your styling job done rather than trying to invent the wheel yourself. If I'm at your spot, if I give you any advice, it would be this: do not write custom code. You want to restrict yourself to a very minimum level of coding, and as far as possible you would want to use frameworks like Bootstrap. Now some of you might say that, Zia, I don't like the color of active, I wanted it to be, say, blue or green. So what I'm going to do here is my active link. Now this is a class name. What do I do with it? I copy it. I'm going to go to the navigation section, hit the dot button, come here and change the um, color to green. And now if I come back to this section, I'm not finding that green color. So I'm going to go to styling, select this element, come to nav, and identify where the color property is coming from. So to find that out, we'll go to the computed column, and once again we are going to select the element here. Okay, I was looking for this. So color blue is coming from ahref. So somewhere we'll have to specify that this thing, if I click on this, it is coming from the A tag. So it is the A tag that is influencing it, and generally elements take precedence over what we studied yesterday, is that classes are more preferred over this thing. Because we applied it at a different place, might be the reason that it is not taking effect. So let me apply this class at the right place. I'm applying it at the A level. Why would it do that? If that isn't working, another trick that you can do is you can add an ID element and say my active link, and because it is ID, I'm going to use a different selector this time. I'm going to come here and say hash my active link, and I'm going to put color as green. I'm hoping that this time it is going to look green. Right, it is green this time, right? So I've applied the ID selector, and through ID I'm getting this color. Alright, So with that, I have made a case for frameworks like Bootstrap. They make creating UI and appearances a lot straightforward. There are a lot of options available inside Bootstrap that you can explore. One thing that I would want to show you is how to create container and fluid systems. All right, so we're going to jump to the next section. I hope you have tried what navs are, what some other elements on the screen are. There's something called as grid, and the reason we would want to use grid is because we are doing mobile first development. There are multiple type of devices that are available, big screens like laptops and monitors and computers, all the way up to small handheld devices like cell phones. Tablets generally fall in this range, and depending on what kind of UI you are creating or what kind of application you are creating, if you want to access the same website on another device, you would want to not ruin the experience of the user. So I have switched to iPad in a smaller setting and look at this particular website, how all the elements from different sections, they have kind of stacked on top of each other. And then when I switch to a bigger screen application like this one, right, the elements kind of separate after 1200 and they appear like column. But on smaller screens like a cell phone Pixel 2, they are stacked on top of each other. The experience of the end user is not ruined when they are interacting with your website. And the objective, let me bump this up to 100%. And the objective of creating this is that you want to create a UI that you write only once, and the end user accesses the version of the website that is most appropriately created for their device. With that, I'm going to pull up a quick image on Google, and I'm going to try to convince you guys that this is how it should actually be. Okay, so let's look at this particular picture. All right. Um, Apologies to my vegetarian friends. This looks like fish, and then there are a couple of uh, salads by its side. Now the question to you guys is, this plate is pretty big. When you have a big plate, you are going to take the main course. You're also going to take what is available on the side. But imagine that you had a very small plate. The question is, if you have a small plate, which of these 10 items are you going to pick? And the answer is the most filling, the most nutritious thing, and you're going to avoid things that you generally take on the side because you have a smaller plate size. The same analogy applies to web development. When we are developing web applications, we have very limited space available on our devices. And like we won't always have big space and we don't know who is going to access our website. So when I switch to smaller devices and try to reduce the dimensions of my page, I would want that these elements they kind of tuck together, stick together, and give me a feeling that is specifically created for that particular device. The way for doing that is using frameworks like uh, Bootstrap, and Bootstrap has a specific mechanism to it. They divide your screen in a big grid, and that grid is generally is definitely like 12 columns all the way up to from column number 1 to column number 12, and these are called rows, and uh, I'm so sorry, these are called columns. There are 12 columns and there are rows that you can add. The way to create that is the all covering element of this particular thing is a container. You create a div or you use a class called container, and then inside container you add rows, and inside rows you can add columns. There is another type of CSS element that I would want to specify at this time, and it is at the rate media. So media is a specific selector inside CSS, and its responsibility is to create um, C- conditional elements. So let me show that to you real quick. I'm going to go back to Visual Studio, inside the CSS file, I'm going to write @media and I'm going to hit tab. Now, there are four types of things that you can select inside this thing. One is screen, another is print, another, there are two more, probably audio devices, and there is one more. Generally, most people enter here all, and they would want to communicate that for all the devices or all the type of devices, they would want to apply some form of filtering. Now, over here, you specify a parameter called minimum, say width, and then you specify the value of that, say 700 pixels. With this, a device with width more than 700 pixels, it is going to get this styling. So I'm going to get rid of most of the HTML that we have added. This is gone, and we're going to create like two divs. Let me add the main tag back, and over here we're going to add div. We're going to apply a class, my div or my card. Over here we're going to, let me repeat this, and inside this I'm going to add CSS. I'm going to call it dot my card, and I'm going to give it width of 500 pixel, border of 1 pixel solid red, and let's do one more thing. Background color of, say, cyan, probably a lighter color. Let's go ahead and see what it appears like on our screens, and it is still the same. So width, let me also go ahead and apply some height to it. I think it is looking for height. Let me put some content inside it. So for some reason it is not taking the height that I was hoping. I think it is something related to CSS. My active link. GIGST. Because of that typo, it was not working. Now notice that these two elements, they are kind of tucked under each other. If I apply a display property here now and call it inline, they are going to sit next to each other, and the block display has kind of gone. The width and height property, that is also not taking effect. But when I'm on bigger screen, I want to override that. I'll copy this, and inside media width greater than this, I'm going to put that I want the display to be block when we are on bigger screen. So it is the same class that I had outside. Inside media all, I have overridden the value, and if you remember our discussion from yesterday, the CSS file is read from top to bottom, and as you are overriding values, the latest value is going to take effect. So if my media query is correct, I think I'm missing one keyword, which is and. Or probably if I delete this, even then it is going to work. Alright, do you see this? Now, when the minimum width is 700 pixel, the display is block. When it is not, the display is inline. Let's put this thing to test. And I'm this time going to reduce the size of this window. I'm going to extract this out. And let's try shrinking the size. And then right at 700, something happens. 698, 702, right? When we switch to 699, the second media query is kind of taking effect. This effect is kind of taken away, and these are media queries for you, like in a very short summary. But then doing this ourselves is going to get extremely tricky, and that's when Bootstrap becomes extremely handy. So I'm going to pull the Bootstrap elements, the Bootstrap website, and let me show it to you how that was called layout. There are containers that you can draw. You start with a div container outside, and then inside these containers you start adding multiple rows and column element. So these are device sizes. XS is extremely small device, medium, large, and extra large devices. And then these media breakpoints, they are kind of defined over here. This is another CSS syntax where you can uh, declare variables like XS and SM, and you can use them in the rest of the code. So there are media types defined that on this pixel size, you switch to a different category. They've gone ahead and they've created massive CSS file that we included, that we had just commented out. And let's uncomment this, because now we are in a position where we can start using them. We can put div class container like this, and inside a container we will have to add rows and columns. I'm going to use emit syntax. Dot row is going to emit this thing out, and then dot lg hyphen call hyphen 5 is going to create 5 div elements with this particular information. So let's quickly go ahead and modify this. 2, 3, 4, 5. And when we come to our UI again, right, these are 5 rows that we can see. Now, this setting is getting applied to large screen devices. If we, okay, I've got the syntax the other way around. It is call hyphen lg hyphen 5. And then if I apply it the right way, notice that it has created 5 columns, right? I'm going to pull up an example from this particular page and show you how a bigger screen, a grid actually works. So if you want to create 3 columns, you are going to create call hyphen sm, and then because we have specified that this is for smaller devices, it is going to work differently for small codes, for small screen. So container row and then column hyphen sm, it is going to give you 3 columns. If you come here, you're going to see 3 columns, but as you start reducing the size of this, at one point on small devices, it has kind of stacked on top of each other. 2 of 3 column and 3 of 3 column, right? Now they are no more sitting elements that are sitting next to each other. They are kind of stacked on top of each other. So what I would suggest to you is that you go ahead and take a look at this particular scheme, this particular website, and decide that on what type of screen you want to apply what column size. And you are not only limited to this particular size, you can go to MD devices, and there are like 12 columns available. So you can select all 12, or you can select a very small part of those sections, like 4 columns out of those 12, and you can start assigning different sections in different sizes to this particular thing. So with that, it is going to appear like this. Because it is large screen, it is not going to create any cause any distribution. But then on medium devices, they are going to take only part of the screen. So right next to this, I can have another call hyphen md, and in that call md, because there is still room available, let me put that on a different row. Call hyphen md hyphen, I'm going to call it 8. And then just to make sense out of these columns, I'm going to add a border element here. Let me add my border. I'm going to paste it on all the elements. So that ways you will get an idea as to how these MD-8, MD-4, they are going to specify different sizes. So over here, I'm going to do dot my border. I'm going to say border 1 pixel solid red. And through this, you're going to see that on medium screens, it is taking a different size. This is the medium screen, and notice that row number 2 has taken all the 8 columns, and then 4 is sitting here. But then notice what happened to 3. Because we are in one row, and one row has only 12 columns available, this row has gone to 16. right? 8 plus 4 plus 4, and then there's not enough room for this particular section, so it has kind of tugged under the next row, and we're going to have to remove that to get the correct effect. So 4 columns each in the first row, and then 8 column and 4 column in the second row. So you can play around with different screen sizes, different combination of these values, and you're going to have a very good experience of working on these devices for this particular size. When you go to bigger screens, it kind of stays the same, but then for smaller devices, it is kind of coming in order. And then this is the kind of effect that you would want to have in your website as well. So read about these tags, and you're going to have a very good luck in creating responsive websites that are friendly with mobile as well.